get a takeoff clearance?
I thought it was okay when they said no delay.
There is a sales strategy called the assumed close. Basically what that means is your salesman just assumes that you're going to buy this thing. For example, you're at a car dealership, you're looking at a car, and he says, great, I'm just going to go ahead and get the paperwork drawn up for you, even though you didn't say anything suggesting that you were ready to buy the car. That maybe works in sales, but that doesn't work in aviation. You can't just assume because they said one thing and then interpret it to mean another thing, like you were cleared for takeoff. Here's the entire video.
Cherokee 5173 Sierra, over signature ready taxi.
Cherokee 5173 Sierra, Atlanta ground. Runway 8 right, taxi via Alpha. Hold short of runway 8 left.
8 right, taxi via Alpha, hold short, 8 left, 73 Sierra.
November 73 Sierra, monitor tower 119.1 on the upper antenna if you got one. Y'all have a good day.
119.1, 73 Sierra, have a good day.
November 5173 Sierra, the approach end, cross 8 left, hold short 8 right, no delay.
Cross 8 left, 8 right, no delay, 73.
Atlanta is a huge and very busy airport, and I didn't even know that they had a section for general aviation aircraft to go in there. Look at me, I'm learning from my own videos. This tiny and very simple and basic airport is Atlanta, and the area where all this audio is taking place is up here. In my opinion, the controllers are talking very slow and very clear with him, and initially they gave him the instructions to go up and hold short here of runway 8 left. After that clearance, the controller says this.
November 73 Sierra, monitor tower 119.1 on the upper antenna if you got one. Y'all have a good day.
I don't think I've ever talked about this in any of the videos, so I thought it made sense to mention it. There are planes, sometimes smaller aircraft, will have an antenna that's on the bottom of the aircraft and one that's on the top of the aircraft. And so by saying use your upper antenna, sometimes what you'll have is smaller aircraft like this, their bottom antenna doesn't receive well or isn't transmitting well to the controllers, so they tell people use the upper antenna, which you almost never hear. I normally don't hear it, but they're basically saying use that upper antenna if you have one, so that way we have better signal. Since I've never talked about that before and it's kind of a weird thing, I thought I'd mention it. And then the controller says this.
November 5173 Sierra, the approach end, cross 8 left, hold short 8 right, no delay.
No delay in aviation means don't hesitate. Do it now, immediately. What I'm guessing is there's probably a plane that's set up or coming in to land on 8 left, and so they want that plane to get across 8 left immediately, hold short of 8 right, and do it right now. So they're saying no delay, so that way, if you saw that video I was doing with Stella, where I took her flying, they said no delay. And so I originally told her that she could make the radio call, but I ended up taking it because I knew what it meant. We needed to move immediately, and I didn't have time for her to say it 2 or 3 times. I'm sure she would have nailed it on the first try, but I didn't have time for her to wait and do it. So I took the radio call and then immediately got us out onto the runway and took off.
Number 5, Whiskey Tango, runway turn right, clear for takeoff, no delay, traffic, mile final.
All right, clear for takeoff, 135 Whiskey Tango.
I was supposed to say 135.
Well, she said no delay, so I wanted to get going.
Okay.
That's what no delay means. But this is what he read back.
Cross 8 left, 8 right, no delay, 73.
In my opinion, the controllers typically are more focused on exactly what is being said by a general aviation aircraft than a commercial airliner aircraft, because a general aviation aircraft may only have one person that's in there, that's moving the plane, that's writing down the instructions, that's doing everything, so their workload is a lot higher, and it's not something that they do every day, so they want to make sure that they get it right. What this pilot said is not the same thing that what the controller had given to him. Essentially, what he's saying is that he's going to cross 8 left and 8 right without delays, which would put him over here. But the controller actually said hold short of 8 right. The controller should have gotten right back on the radio right there and confirmed that he understood that he needed to hold short of 8 right. Instead, that controller let it slide, and this is what happened next.
There's 73 Sierra, turn left heading 020.
Left, 020, 73 Sierra.
There's 73 Sierra, did you get a takeoff clearance?
I thought it was okay when they said no delay.
There's 73 Sierra, yes, she gave you the crossing for runway 8 left, but to taxi to 8 right.
Sorry about that.
It's okay. Number 5173 Sierra, possible pilot deviation. When you land, can you call our tower, please?
Yes. Can you give me the phone number?
First, I think this is very important. This pilot made a very big mistake. They took off without a takeoff clearance. That is never going to be acceptable. But the thing that's really important that I want you to learn from, if you are ever planning to be a pilot, is how they took responsibility for it, they apologized, and then they got the number down. They didn't give all kinds of excuses, they weren't rude to the controller, and you saw how smooth that interaction was. Now, as a result of that, this pilot, I'm going to just guess here, is going to have to meet with somebody from the FAA. They're going to review these tapes. They're going to go over everything. He's probably going to need some additional training that's going to be mandated by the FAA before he gets to go fly by himself again, which is fine. But had he been rude or creating another bigger problem, then there could have been a more serious circumstance. Based off of the way the controller is asking this question right here,
73 Sierra, did you get a takeoff clearance?
I'm assuming that he didn't create a very big problem by taking off. Obviously, it's nothing that you should ever do, but that's based off of the language and the way she's talking and the fact she gave him a heading. It sounds like there wasn't a big problem that was created by what he did here. It is funny to me because air traffic control is kind of like the police in some ways. They aren't the judge and executioner, and that's why they said possible pilot deviation. And I like the way she emphasized it because it's very clear he took off without a clearance, but she is not the person that can make that final determination. So they always say possible pilot deviation. So she says this.
Air 5173 Sierra, possible pilot deviation. When you land, can you call our tower, please?
I'm sure that pilot will never confuse without delay and clear for takeoff ever again. Now this next audio also happens in Atlanta, but the controller is not nearly as nice. But I'm going to do it in a little bit of a different format here because of the way the controller is talking with the pilots and the overall circumstance. Hopefully you're watching this on something bigger than a small phone because it's going to make it a lot easier to see what's happened here. But imagine you are the SkyWest plane that just landed, you've gotten off the runway and now you're right here. And you're going to want to park right here. Now listen to the controller's instructions on how he wants them to get there.
Sky with 3597, turn left on Bravo and cross 26 left at Bravo 4, taxi ramp to frequency. Good morning.
Left turn at Bravo, cross runway 26 left, Bravo 4 with you to the terminal, Sky 3597. Good morning.
Sky West 3597, left turn on Bravo to ramp 4 with me, American gives way.
Give way, American, maintenance.
I'm talking to Sky West 3597, do you know where you're going?
Yeah, you guys gave us the Fox, nothing after that, SkyWest 5284.
Wrong, I said cross 26 left at Bravo 4, taxi to the ramp with me. What are you doing?
3597, and we're going to 4 November for Delta 20.
Well, you're pointed the wrong direction because you're looking at ramp 3. Turn left on Echo and taxi to ramp 4. You've got 3 people waiting now.
Okay, turn left on Echo, ramp 4, Sky 3597.
Come on, guys. You're in Atlanta now. Get it together.
Sorry.
Something that's important to know is that in the U.S., an air traffic controller can ride on the flight deck with us, and they can experience and listen to everything that's going on, and I think that more controllers should do this. In all the years that I can think about flying, I can think of maybe 2 that I remember off the top of my head that have ridden on the flight deck with me. And the problem is that this controller, who knows Atlanta very well, is expecting that these pilots know the airport as well as they do. So as soon as they land, they have an entire map of that airport. But it doesn't work like that. As soon as I leave an airport, I've forgotten basically everything about that airport. Of course, there are places you go again and again and again, so you start to remember things. But a lot of times I'll land in an airport, I've been there maybe 2 or 3 times, or I haven't been there in 3 or 4 years, and the controller starts talking really fast because they know that airport really well, but the pilot is not familiar with it. These regional pilots usually fly to the same set of airports a lot, so they're probably pretty familiar with this airport, but it's possible that they're not. There were times when I was at the regionals where I would go to a different base and do their type of flying because I thought, oh, that'd be fun flying to be doing over there, and so I'm not familiar with it. Or at my airline, you followed me for a while. On Instagram, you'll see for a while I'll be flying South America, and then for a while I'll be over in Asia, and then I'll be over doing Europe. And usually what's happening is I'm switching my base around and just doing different things because I get bored doing the same thing again and again. Which means that even though I've been with this airline for years, I could fly to a place that I've never been to before. So my controller at that airport might think, oh, that airline is here all the time. They are familiar with this airport. Let me give them these instructions really quickly. But I've never been there, so now I'm thinking, okay, I'm writing it down as quickly as I can and trying to follow along, but I don't know what's happening. So I think these controllers, and I think if you're a controller, you should spend a lot of time and go do 4 or 5 legs with a crew and just watch everything that goes on and listen to how the controllers speak to them, because you'll get a fully different perspective on what is going on, what up on the flight deck. After we land, we have a lot that's happening. So we're back here in Atlanta with the controller with the least southern hospitality at the airport. My guess is the pilots just landed here on 26 right and vacated at Bravo 3. As you know, each runway can have 2 different sets of numbers or numbers and letters that go with it. So in this case, when you're landing a certain direction and you're crossing another runway, they're going to give you the direction that that traffic is moving on. The traffic is going to be taking off or landing from that direction. So that's why I'm guessing they landed on 26 right and now they're crossing on 26 left. The controller could say cross 8 right, but they say cross 26 left, which leads me to believe the pilots just landed here on 26 right and exited at Bravo 3, which looks like an appropriate distance for a plane like this to land and get off the runway. Then the controller says this.
Sky with 3597, turn left on Bravo and cross 26 left to Bravo 4, taxi the ramp to frequency. Good morning.
The way the controller is saying this is you were cleared to cross the runway, which you always need to have permission to do. At every airport, there's never an assumption that you're ever cleared to cross the runway. However, the way he's saying it is you're cleared to cross that runway and taxi to the ramp however you want to get there. It doesn't really matter. However, in an airport like Atlanta, that is very abnormal. As pilots, we're accustomed to the controller telling us, hey, I want you to go this way, then this way, then this way to get into your parking spot, because they have a plan of the flow that they want their airport to be moving in. I may not be familiar with it, and it sounds like there was other planes in the area, so you're not just going to make the assumption that you're going to go however you want. But that was the way he read the initial instructions to them. If I was them, I would understand it, clear to cross the runway, and do it however I want, especially with the attitude that he has. But they cross the runway and he says this.
Sky West 3597, left turn on Bravo to ramp 4 with me, American gives way.
You hear that? He said left on Bravo. What I think he meant to say was left on Echo, but he said Bravo, and the pilots can't just assume or read his mind that he meant Echo. So they did the right thing and they didn't move. They were probably looking at their chart to figure out where they were and figure out where Bravo was with relation to where they were going. And they were trying to figure that all out really quickly before they got on the radio. What he should have said after they crossed the runway was left on Echo, Fox 4 to park, which would have taken them exactly into the ramp here, and they could have found their parking spot from there. But typically the rule is in aviation, when you're a pilot and you're taxiing on a runway and you're not 100% sure what's going on, then you stop the plane. Don't just keep moving. And in some airports like Chicago, you have to keep moving. But typically, anywhere in the world, if you're confused of where you're at or where you're supposed to be, you stop the plane and both of you look at the charts and figure out exactly where you're at, where you're supposed to be, and then go from there. You don't just make the assumption, and so then you could get yourself in a lot more problems. There have been accidents that resulted as pilots moving thinking, oh, I think I know where we are, but they don't. So whenever there's a confusion, I always say, hey, let's stop for a second, let's figure out where we're at, and then we can keep moving. So I think they stopped to figure that out, and the controller didn't like that. Listen here as he makes a mistake and almost says turn left on Bravo for a 3rd time.
Turn left on Echo and taxi to ramp 4. You've got 3 people waiting now.
The SkyWest pilot is being super polite considering the way this controller is talking to them. I mean, super polite. And the thing is that as pilots, we typically, if there's something that's going wrong, we typically put the responsibility on us. Most pilots are very A-type personality. We want to be the best at what we do. So if something's going wrong, we're typically thinking, okay, I've messed this up, so let me just get this task accomplished and we can figure it out after the fact. So the pilot's being very polite. I think if they had known in hindsight, like all of you and me when we're listening to this audio, if they had known how bad this controller was messing up, they maybe wouldn't have been as nice, or maybe she would have been that nice. I don't know, but I probably wouldn't have been that nice with the way that he's talking to me if I had known everything. However, in the circumstance that she's in, I'm probably going to be acting exactly like she is, going, okay, great, yeah, that's fine, you want me to go there, not a big deal. But this part is totally uncalled for.
Come on, guys, you're in Atlanta now. Get it together.
If you've watched a lot of these videos, you know that I am typically more critical of pilots than I am of controllers. However, this controller is totally out of line. There's no reason to escalate something like this in this environment. Adding that, hey, we'll get it together, blah, 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 that has no purpose being or helping anyone in this situation. This controller, honestly, if you ask my opinion, should go fly the line for like a week with these pilots, do 4 or 5 legs a day, and then see what it's like for those pilots going to places that they're unfamiliar with and having to move the aircraft, clean up the aircraft, put everything away while listening to the controller talk very fast about an area which they are super familiar with, and these pilots or this controller have never been to before, because they're going to realize that, hey man, maybe I do know Atlanta very well, but these pilots aren't super familiar with it, so they're taking their time to move, because you would rather have a pilot take their time, go a little extra slow, and then not make a mistake than cross a runway or cross a taxiway that results in an accident. So this controller, in my opinion, totally out of line. The SkyWest crew did an amazing job, super polite, way more polite than she needed to be towards this controller, if you want my opinion. If you enjoyed this video, check out this one over here. I look forward to hearing from you. Until then, keep the blue side up.